What's up? Welcome. I'm back. And on this channel, it's funny because I always keep saying I'm going to do more videos, try to do more consistent. Then I'll be looking at it and I'll be like, damn, sometimes 5, 6 months goes by before I do videos. So I'm going to say it again, but this time I mean it. I'm definitely going to be more consistent in this channel. I just make a lot of content on different platforms. So this platform was always near and dear to me because this was the second one. I actually started when I first started doing videos in 2009. I had something called Spark Post, which was entertainment and politics. So that was actually the first, but this one was the second. This one blew up more than the first. So sometimes I forget that this was actually the second, but this is definitely, I wouldn't exist on any platform if it wasn't for this one. So I'm gonna try to keep it maintained a little bit better in terms of producing content. And the thing is, this is a spiritual channel, so at the same time, I found that with a lot of other spiritual channels, they just put information out to put information out. And if you deal with metaphysics, spirituality, that is not the way to do it. Like when you do it like that, it becomes something that's not spirituality. It becomes some fast food metaphysics, which is the problem that for me plagues the spiritual community today. And that leads me into what I'm going to talk about in this video. The thing about spirituality that's interesting is that, people, the average person, when they say they're spiritual, it usually tends to be one of the mainstream religions. If you're in the West, that'll be Christianity, to some extent Judaism. If you're in the East, it could be Buddhism. The East is a little bit bigger, so it could be Buddhism, it could be Islam, because the Middle East is in the East, right? Technically, it's in Asia. It spans parts of Europe and Africa, but the majority of the Middle East is in Asia. So, it depends on where in the East you are, but, some places it could be Islam, some places it could be Buddhism. Some places it could be Confucianism. That's mainstream. But when I'm talking about mainstream, for the most part here, both East and West applies, but I'm definitely talking about more the West. Because in the West tends to be more materialistic in the way they think. And I don't mean materialistic in terms of buying things per se, because shoot, in China they'll consume more than we do in America at times. So I'm not really talking about materialism when it deals with consumption of products, right? Or acquiring products. I'm talking about more of seeing the world. Seeing the world meaning you see the world externally first, and you don't even know there's an internal exists. Or even if you know there's an internal world, you see the external world first. So I'm talking about more the West, because the West has more of a problem with that mindset. Now, and my audience is mostly Western, so it fits. I kind of killed two birds with one stone. The thing is, people tend to go to spirituality, right? And I would say most people go to spirituality when they're under some kind of distress, right? Distress in terms of, they may be doing bad in life, maybe going through a tough time. Others may be curious, right? They may be curious with life, and sometimes when I say curious, meaning they know that there's something else behind it, right? And so then they say, wow, I wonder, they're curious about what else exists besides life, right? And in a sense, one of those things, from my example, from my perspective, I would say is that actually at times works against the spiritual seeker, because the first seeker who's going to the spiritual world because things may not be going well for them in the material world, when they go to the spiritual world because of that mindset, they then try to push answers, right? They try to get answers quick because they're really working on two different levels. They're trying to get answers for why their life is not going the way they want to, as well as maybe a curiosity for the spiritual world. And what ends up happening is that's actually, in my opinion, the majority of spiritual seekers. So then that has caused a new type of spirituality to arise, or newer, not new in terms of something that just came out 5-10 years ago. I'm going back a little bit more than that. It gave birth to a newer type of spirituality that tends to focus more on only abstract concepts. And that's affected both the East and the West. In fact, the East might have a bigger problem with people trying to just chase abstract concepts in the West, because the East naturally thinks more internally. So that actually works against them in that sense, that some of the types of spirituality over there focuses only on the abstract. And when I say abstract, concepts that's not locked to time and space. That may seem easy to understand, but if you look at your mind and you examine the way you see things, almost everything you see is based on time and space. And applying that where you can go outside of that is very hard. So when you're making a spiritual system that's focused on that, you're gonna probably get it wrong more than you get it right, honestly. So what happens now is that when the person says, I'm going to go into spirituality because I don't like how my life is going, they don't understand how in the real ancient days, 2,000-3,000 years ago, that was not easy. When you in 2-3, even if you say 800 years ago, if you talk about spirituality and you say I'm going to be a spiritual seeker, you know how hard that is. That's not something, because what you're doing now, and goes into why I mentioned neuroscience and being 7 years old, because what happens is when any neuroscientist will tell you the foundation, your brain, your personality especially forms by 7. And everything after that, you're just adding to the personality, but the foundation is from 1 to 7. Literally, that's who you are. So most people in the West, this is why I'm focusing more on the West. Most people in the West are coming from a mainstream religion, probably Christianity, and that's who they are, right? So what does that mean? Well, let's say you become 30 years old, 35, 40, even 20, even 25, and you say, I don't like Christianity, I'm going to explore spirituality. What happens is the foundation of your being was already formed. So when you're examining new types of spiritual systems, it's very hard for you to truly bond with those systems. It's not impossible, but if you're using mostly words, so meaning, let's say I pick up a book and I'm using mostly words, I'm trying to, I'm absorbing information by reading it. Yeah, you're adding on top of your personality, but that's not who you are. Is already formed, and that's not even counting, ancestors, and you going into your DNA, and because all that stuff, we carry ancestral memory in ourselves of our bodies. So who we are, like when I'm talking about who we are from 1 to 7, that's one level. On another level, it's who we were generationally, which is even worse. Because if you're practicing Christianity for like 1,000 years, 800 years, and this is Christianity. I'm just giving an example. Right? If you're practicing that for 800 years, 1,000 years, that's in your DNA. That's in your cellular memory. That's in your ancestral memory. You know how hard it is to break that? And what ends up happening is who we are always tries to come back to the surface. So the shamans of the past, and probably of modern times too, knew that when we go through certain time periods, right, where when your foundation actually comes to the surface. So it's almost saying who you are, or who you, and it could be, because when you do with shamans, they'll be talking about ancestrally as well, right? So shamans in the East, in the Central Asia area, and then some people call these people shamans, but they're really medicine men, the Native American medicine men in this part of the world, right? This is why they focus so much on ancestors too, because that's the foundation. So in nature as well, right? So what does that mean? Who we are. It tries to come back, basically saying we're like on a wheel. So there's a primordial part of us that's always trying to come back, right? And so let's say I'm doing I'm in the West and I'm doing some yoga, I'm doing some shamanism from the East, right? I'm doing some Sufism, Kabbalism, Hermeticism, whatever, right? I'm reading it, I'm absorbing it, but it's not penetrating a certain part of my mind. And that part of your mind, which is the subconscious, on another level, on a deeper level, because subconscious is multi-layered. So of course, anytime you read a book, the subconscious stores it. Anytime you absorb information, the subconscious stores it. But there's levels to the subconscious. So there's a level of the subconscious mind that actually creates your body, right? This is what this ties into DNA and things like that. Creates your body. So who you are generationally is already set, right? And so when you attempt to add on to that only using words, right, meaning you're just reading books, it doesn't penetrate it as much as it should. So then this is the reason why the majority of people spiritually, when they start doing spiritual, I've seen it. I've been teaching, putting metaphysical videos out since 2009. And I've seen people come to me gun-ho and pumped up for spirituality, right? Pumped up to start spiritual work. Last a year or two, after 2-3 years, they're like, they don't have the motivation. And that's being me being nice, saying 2-3 years. And then the motivation fades. And then they say, I don't believe this is true. My life hasn't changed. And that's the majority. I mean, I actually see the majority of spiritual seekers say that. But my life hasn't changed. And the reason why your life hasn't changed is because you're practicing spiritual systems that are more recent. And the human condition has been sick for a long time. You can make the argument the human condition has been sick ever since we came out of the wilderness. You know, when we were living with the earth, when we were more harmonized with the ecosystem, we weren't as, I don't want to say sick. We had other problems, but we more understood who we were, because we're animals at the end of the day, and every animal has to understand its place in the ecosystem. And now humans, Homo sapiens, are primates, and we forget that, and we don't know where we are in the ecosystem. And when we don't know where we are in the ecosystem, what our role is, there's a level of information, there's a level of understanding that we don't have. So then when we apply newer spiritual systems who just obsessed with abstract concepts, and then after, we do it for a little bit, we don't get the results we want because our physical lives don't change. And what ends up happening is people end up looking at spiritual systems and spirituality and saying, oh, it's not real. But that comes into it because we don't understand that spirituality has been here before human beings will even walk on the earth. Like understanding of the inner world is something that all beings do. And yeah, when you come from a shamanistic point of view, animals and plants are beings too. And there's things in between. There's minerals, even rocks. All beings have consciousness. That's the way it goes in the older systems. So spirituality has been here for a long time. Sometimes as Homo sapiens, we are egotistical enough to just call spirituality something that's related to being human. And I understand that. But that's part of the problem in that sense. Because what now happens is we don't really realize this is why the creation of what people call the tarot cards, originally a book of Thoth. This is why it was made into card forms. The reason why it was made into card forms or picture forms was because the way around the problem I'm describing is through imagery of the mind. Imagery is a way to directly talk to the subconscious mind. Mental images. And when you directly talk to the subconscious mind and interface with it, then you could alter it. Then you could put new information, right? You could put new information in the mind and it accepts it. So think about it like an animal. The subconscious mind is a lot of different ways. You want to look at the subconscious mind, it's like an animal. Animals don't really understand. I mean, even animals who are a little bit more conscious, like dogs and cats, they could, especially dogs. Dogs definitely, they have a little bigger brains. Cats are better at feeling. But in terms of like learning tricks and stuff like that, dogs are much better at that, right? Look at a dog. A dog could understand certain words, but you have to keep saying the words over and over and over again. Maybe put it with some kind of reward. Maybe change the tone of your voice for the dog to understand the words, right? The word. And you can't, it's not going to be a lot of words a dog will understand. I'm probably guessing between 50, 60 words, maybe, right? Because a little child could go 200. A dog, probably 50, I would assume. But when you do it, when you do it with words, you have to keep doing it over and over again. And it's a lot of times the dog might forget it. Especially, this is why some people put words with rewards or treats. Right? The subconscious mind is the same. So if somebody tells the subconscious mind, I want to get money. Yeah, it would work if you do it over and over and over again. This is primarily the reason why newer spiritual systems don't work. Because if a person says, I'm going to do this for 6 months, I want to get a result, I want to do this for a year. And when I'm saying doing it, they do it half-assed to begin with. Right? They don't, like, if you go to the East and you go inside a Buddhist temple, and certain Hindu temples, listen, you're doing that every day. You're literally giving up your whole life for spirituality. It's not something that you come in and someone do for 5 minutes or 3 days a week, and I'm going to make it. It doesn't work like that, especially if you're using words. And so this is why the shamans, some of the occultists of the West, some of the mystics of the East, truly understood it was about pictures. It's about the images that you put in your mind every day. That's how you transform. And so when you have a spiritual system, it has to work image wise, not just telling you pretty words and stories. And no, it has to mentally put images in your mind, or train your mind what certain images mean. And then when your mind starts to accept it, your physical body changes, literally. Because that's the thing that, Hermeticists and certain occultists knew in the past. Like, there's an energy of decay that actually comes and in a sense, it's the energy that kills you, right? It's not bad. It's just part of nature. And the only way to beat that is with mental imagery, not words. Sometimes actions don't even do it. When I say actions, meaning you could look at somebody doing a ritual, you could do a ritual yourself. Right? There's people you see some Western occultists who do rituals all day. I see people do LBR, lesser pentagram ritual, for 15 years and they don't experience anything. Right? Because ritual without understanding the imagery that you put in your mind is not effective. And that's really what it is, the power of imagery. And that's why the tarot cards were one of the most powerful instruments somebody could have. Now, I would say 70% of people use tarot cards for only divination. So you use it only for divination, you're not going to understand what I'm talking about. And it's not, the thing is with this, it's something that what ends up happening is a lack of understanding of this almost opens the door where people don't even understand. There's been two different distinct groups spiritually since the beginning, right? The first group that I'm talking about, which are the group that is not born in under the proper setting of the spiritual system that they should be practicing, right? So they end up doing spirituality or trying to seek spirituality between, it could be anything between ages. In the older days, they probably started earlier, 15 years old, 14 years old, 13 years old, trying to attain spirituality. That's why they end up doing a little better. In our time, you're lucky if you're in your 20s and you say there's a spiritual world out there. You're lucky if you're in your 20s and you say this is spiritual world out there. I want to know it, man. I gotta give it to you. Then you're on the right path. Like, not on the right path, you have it much easier. The majority of people don't acquire this in their 20s, right? In their 20s, they're more focused on materialism. Majority of people when I say majority of people, the majority of spiritual seekers tend to wake up or begin to at 30, 31, 32, right? So you wake up at 31, 32, you already been in the game for a while. Even if you get spirituality right and you practice it nonstop, you do your thing for 18 years and you turn 50. You had 32 years where you weren't doing what you're supposed to do. 18 years where you were doing what you're supposed to do. Sorry. What you're doing, you're going to attain a spiritual system, a spiritual understanding, not spiritual system. You're going to attain a spiritual understanding on a certain level, on the lower tier level, right? That's why you see most respected masters tend to be 60, 70. So like, let's say you start doing 32 and now you're 70 and now it's 38 years, 32 years. You might say, okay, I got 38 years of doing it. Yeah, you good. You good. But you still the first level what I'm talking about, which is a lower level. Because if you go back to the beginning of my video, I'm basically saying 7 years old is who you are. If you don't do the picture stuff, what I'm saying, mental imagery, daily, weekly, you're just putting words and a kind of ritualized routine, whether it's prayers, whether it's just doing yoga, whatever the case might be. And so you're 70, so you were practicing the proper stuff from 30 years, 32 years you weren't. Those 32 years that you weren't still can overpower the other 38. But you're better than a regular seeker, right? Meaning not better, but you're more aware than a person who's never become spiritual at all. Unfortunately, when 90% of the world that has never been initiated thinks of spirituality, they're thinking of the first group, which is the group that has the lesser understanding for the most part. Now, there's a second group, far smaller, far more advanced, who understands everything I'm just saying in this video, right? They understand it completely. They understand that who you are, it starts at 7, from 1 to 7, right? And they probably, I would say, are more responsible with their children. They probably have been doing spirituality much longer. They probably have come from a lineage of spiritual seekers, spiritual practitioners. So obviously then you come from a lineage of that. Yeah, your kids, and from that time period or from that lineage, right, or that bloodline would freaking be practicing spirituality from the beginning, right? And it's not even as simple as saying, oh, I'm better than someone. It's not really about that. But it's a level of understanding. When you start doing spirituality that late and you're using words or only standard rituals to connect to that energy, you're only going to go so far. So the second group has far more knowledge than the first group, far more a deeper understanding of spiritual concepts. In fact, you can make the argument the second group has a level of understanding the first group wouldn't even come close to understanding. Like, not even come close. They understand certain things when it comes to nature, certain things when it comes to the inner world. The first group doesn't even know exists. And that's what actually kind of represents. It kind of starts a lot of the spiritual, I would say, the spiritual caste system that exists. Because the second group is far more powerful, has a far more better grip of spiritual subjects. A lot of subjects that the first group doesn't even know exist, right? And the thing is, this is not for me to say, oh, look at 2 different groups. Where you at? You obviously in the first group. There are people who are not born in the first group who make it to the second group, who bypass the first group, make it the second group. The whole point of it is, how do they do that? Understand the concept I'm saying. Understand that spirituality is not something that you're just gonna, pick up a book for 10 years and say, I got it. It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that you visualize. It's a lifestyle that you live. And that's the difference. Books is important. Books is extremely important because when we talk about mental imagery, there's a foundation that a lot of us don't have that you're only going to get from reading books. I'll be honest with you. So this is not a job of reading books. This is to say, after you read the books, or not even after, because you should be reading books forever till you die. But after you get a certain understanding, mental imagery has to take over. And mental imagery is extremely important because mental imagery nourishes the creative faculty in your mind. And that's why there's such a link between spirituality and art, spirituality and music, because there's the same, that faculty has to be developed. It's not developed enough in the average human. And because of that, we can't even picture certain concepts. You can't picture certain concepts. You can't interact with your true mind the way you're supposed to. So when I make this video, it's really more about understanding that you're going to have a somewhat aggressive approach to spirituality, but much more aggressive than people think. It's not aggressive in terms of, because you know what ends up happening is the regular spiritual community is aggressive in the wrong way. It's aggressive in terms of they look at somebody in the matrix and they call you're in the matrix. I'm into spiritual. I'm not talking about that type of aggression. That type of aggression is foolish. No offense. Type of aggression I'm talking about is inner aggression. Understanding how far we've deviated as a species from understanding the inner world, and understanding that because we have went in such a bad path for so long, we created a certain type of momentum. And the only way you're gonna reset that is to be organized, like in the military way, internally with yourself. And you build a routine. You build a spiritual routine. You know, you read your books, you do your rituals. You understand that, look, it's gonna take years, because I didn't start this at 7. I think that's the key. I wasn't between 1 and 7 when I started. I wasn't even 15. Most people doing this video weren't even 15 when they started doing spirituality. Myself, I kind of look at alternative medicine and healing and spirituality is the same, but many people don't. I know that because I have a health child, and half the spiritual people didn't care, right? Because they look at spirituality and health as different. So I might have started practicing alternative health early, like in '98, which is, you talking about like 21 years ago. I'm showing my age with that one. But spirituality, I started doing spirit, like what you call spirituality, probably 2005, maybe like really hardcore, 2007. You know what I mean? I started doing videos, spiritual videos 2009. So I started doing spiritual videos like 2 years after I started doing spirituality hardcore. So you're talking about 2007, it's 2019. I've only been doing it for 12 years. I'm 40 years old. So I'm 40 years old, started doing 12 years based on the video, what I'm saying, the information I'm saying in this video. So I had 28 years of not doing it. And there's 28 years at the beginning of my foundation. So I understand I got to work hard like a mother effer to get that, to reset that. Because that's what you're really doing. You're resetting it. And understand that, hey, I'm not in the second group. My parents didn't teach me spirituality. My culture is not really spiritual. So I'm not in the second, I'm in the first group. Meaning people who start this stuff at 30-some years old. If you're lucky. If you're lucky, you start in your 20s. Right? I would say if you start in your 20s, you're lucky. Like I started at 28. But for the most part, I mean, that's might as well be 30. But for the most part, we got to work much harder. We have to understand that our subconscious mind will always try to go back to the foundation from 1 to 7. And that's still being nice, because that's in the world of neuroscience from 1 to 7. You start getting into the world where the second group, if they try to help us, try to break us down, they say, man, it's ancestral. So most of our ancestors have been doing the same, like most people's ancestors have been practicing the same spiritual systems for the last 600 years, 800 years. You know? So when you look at it, like, so I mean, it can even be broken down racially. If you are Caucasian in the West, you most likely were Christian earlier than people of color, than Native Americans, blacks were, right? But Native Americans and blacks probably have been Christian at this point for 400 years, 400 or 500 years. You know, the Caucasians or people from Europe, probably, I mean, you're talking about Roman Catholic Church, the Protestants, about 1,000 years. So that actually then affects you, I guess, your deeper subconscious mind, which affects your body, which would be your DNA. So yeah, that energy, and this is not a diss towards Christianity, because there's definitely esoteric versions of Christianity. Like, you know, you go to the Gnostics, esoteric version of Christianity. You go to the Martinists, a more esoteric version than the Gnostics. Most people, when they think of Christianity, they think of esoteric Christianity, they think of Gnostics. Martinists will smash Gnostics in terms of esoteric Christianity. So just like in Judaism, Kabbalah, esoteric Judaism, and Islam, Sufism, esoteric Islam. So this is not a diss to the Abrahamic religions. I'm talking about if you've been practicing them in their more mainstream forms. And then God forbid you're not even doing that. If you're like an atheist, which that has happened too. There's people who are atheists. There's people who come from a family atheists. Same thing, same setup. That's your foundation. So then, to override that, you need mental imagery. No question. That's why you need to organize the creative parts of your mind. You need to nourish it. Music, art. But reading, logic, has to be side by side with the creative aspects of life. And if you do that, and then you apply your rituals more intensely, and you're more patient, and you say, I know this is going to take a while. This is not something I'm practice for 5 years and get it. You do that, you'll be in a better state. It's a better state of things. And I think at that point, when you start to do your meditations, when you start to do your prayers, when you start to, you do your fasting, you do your rituals, you would get a better experience. And when you get a better experience, you feel better about yourself. You harmonize with your environment a little bit better. And yeah, if you do it imagery, you got the chance to get into the second level that I'm talking about. Of course, you have to still go to the first level. But if you do it the traditional way where most people do, you lucky if you get to the first level and it does anything for you. So that's my 2 cents when it comes down to why you practice spirituality. Don't get the results you want. Look at that and you see why. So Siris King, till next time, peace.